Welcome to Tech Primers. In this video, we are going to see what are serverless architectures. So imagine, right, there is no server and you want to deploy your code. Your code is running there and there is no server out there which is running currently. So how is that architecture sounds, right? So it sounds crazy, isn't it? So that is what serverless architecture is all about. So basically serverless architecture is a design pattern or a way where your processors will be running and where your function will not be executed until it is called or basically it is triggered. So if you notice here, currently I have the website from Martin Fowler. So if you don't know who Martin Fowler is, Martin Fowler is a developer like us. So he's an author basically, so he is a visionary, I would say. So he currently works in ThoughtWorks. So he has his own idea of how you should design stuff, how you should do agile software development. He has lots of credits in taking sessions and coming up with proposals and stuff. So I'm a big fan of him basically. So that is why I'm using his particular website to just explain you what serverless architecture is. Okay, so he currently works in ThoughtWorks. So if you want to follow him, you can check his website martinfowler.com. He has very good articles on every topic. If you notice, he has lots of videos, designs, document related topics, agile related topics, refactoring related topics. So he is the one who created a book called Refactoring in the 1990s, and it became famous. And then like how we call now, right, refactoring. So that is how it became famous. So let's come to the main topic for this particular session. So it's the serverless architecture. So as I said earlier, serverless architecture is where uh, you will not be running a server full time. Okay, so your execution will be triggered based on an event or an action. Okay, so basically it can be called as backend as a service. Basically you don't have anything running. Okay, your code is lying out there. If somebody calls that particular code, then it will be executed. Okay, it can also be called as function as a service. So basically you write functions and those functions can be executed at that instance when there is something coming and triggering, right? So what happens most of the time in production, right? If you had worked in any company already, right, you know that okay, all your processes are running there in production, but you never know when a request comes into your production machine, right? And it comes rarely. That's what we know, right? And for that we always keep on running. And if you know, cloud is all about how much ever time you are utilizing, that much amount of money you have to pay, right? So that is why people thought of serverless architecture as a best fit. So basically what serverless architecture says is you don't have your server always running. So whenever there is an event or a action which is triggered for this particular function, you trigger the function only when it is required. Okay, so basically at that particular instance your function will be spawned in a server, and you have to pay only for the time with which it ran on a server. So basically that is the serverless architecture. So actually, as the name suggests, there is no server, but you have to use the server at some point, right? So that is when you trigger an action. Okay, so that is why it's called serverless architecture. But imagine that there are servers. It will be running on servers only, but it will be used only when it is triggered. So basically your imagine that your JVM is down, and then a request comes in, your JVM gets alive, processes that request, returns the response back, and then it goes for sleep. So that is how what do you call, you can visualize it. Okay, that is how it works. So this is the website from the Martin Fowler's website. Okay, this is the article from the Martin Fowler's website. So there are lots of information about why you need and stuff like that. So I'll just cover some basic stuff. So if you have worked on applications which are MVCs, right, the client server architecture. So you would have noticed that we have a browser, then we have a backend server, and then we have a database. So if you notice here, this is how our current architecture is, right? So you have a browser, you have a backend server which is rendering request from the browser and then giving it back, right? And then you have a database from which the server fetches the data and then sends it back to the browser. So in terms of serverless architecture, how we will design is we will start splitting our service into multiple microservices, and we use whatever we want as a function. So if you notice here, there is a client browser, you have an authentication service separately with which you authenticate your server. Okay, once it is done, you go to the gateway. So gateway is where all our routing happens. Okay, the gateway is going to route it to a specific function. So if you want to purchase, it goes to purchase function. If you want to search the retail store, it goes to the search function. So that is why if you notice here, these are serverless architecture. So basically purchase function and search functions are serverless. And then you have a database. So once your function calls the database, you can process the data and then send it back, right? So this is how serverless architecture will look like when you are splitting this particular architecture. Okay, so basically we are saying that split based on functionalities. Okay, and those functionalities can be put inside a function. Okay, so that there is no harm for it to run independently, right? There are lots of other things. I'm not going to go through that, but I will show a typical example of where the serverless architecture is already used and who is the big player. If you notice here, I have already opened the website. So Amazon provides something called AWS Lambda. Okay, if you're familiar with AWS is a cloud Linux storage which runs on the infrastructure as a service platform, right? So it is an infrastructure as a service offering from Amazon. So similar to that, Amazon provides AWS Lambda, which is nothing but a function as a service or a backend as a service offering. Okay, so you can, it's already live in production basically. So Amazon is offering that for free. It's not for free, but yeah, you can sign up for free for some time. But yeah, so what it does is whatever we talked about, right? So it provides you a functionality to store your functions inside the AWS Lambda, and then it will be triggered based on an action or a event. If you notice here, that is what they say. So AWS Lambda lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers. You pay only for the compute time you consume, and there is no charge when your code is not running, which is a major advantage, right? So most of the time our processes are idle and you don't have to pay for that, right? So with Lambda, you can run code for virtually any type of application or a backend service, all with zero administration. Just upload your code and the Lambda takes care of everything required to run and scale your code with high availability. You can set up your code to automatically trigger from other AWS services or call it directly from any website or mobile web. Okay, that is what the Lambda says, AWS Lambda says. And if you notice here, what are the major advantages or features of AWS Lambda is no servers to manage. So literally you don't have to manage the server. So if you have worked in an IT company, I would say that okay, definitely we would have had a chance to see a server, log into a machine, manage that server, make sure the health of the server is good, and make sure that is not going down and it's always available. All these things we would have maintained, right? So that you don't have to do about worry about. So we don't have to worry about the server management in the AWS Lambda world. So it is all taken care by the Lambda itself. Okay, continuous scaling. So you can scale your application. So let's say you wrote a function. Okay, and that particular function is getting triggered by 1,000 people at the same time. Okay, you don't have to worry about that because AWS Lambda automatically scales. So literally it can spawn thousands of threads or thousands of servers parallelly, so that each request is individually handled. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. See, in a traditional operating system, what do? We run it on a server, and if the memory is out of memory is like exceeding that limit, we won't be able to do it, or we have to have a global load balancer and then load balance between two different servers in different data centers or within the same data center. We have to split based on that, right? And we have to scale down later, or we have to keep them running idle in an idle state, because always you might not be expecting high volumes, right? High volumes of requests. So that we don't have to worry about in AWS Lambda, because underneath the Lambda infrastructure, it is going to be AWS cloud. So the spawning of servers are going to be cloud based, so you don't have to worry about the scaling aspect. Okay, and then sub-second metering. So based on the as I said, right? So based on the time you will be charged. So that is what this is all about. Okay, so how does it work? So you just need to upload your code to AWS Lambda. So currently I'm just telling what AWS Lambda does. So you have to place your code in the AWS Lambda. That is the only restriction right now which I see, because your code is going to reside in somebody else's data center. Okay, so from there you can spawn based on an event, basically any REST endpoint call, or based on a file push, or any mobile app connectivity or something like that. Okay, so that is how it gets triggered, and then your Lambda function processes the data and then sends it back. Okay, and then you pay only for the processing time for each function. That's it. Okay, so if you notice here, these are just some implementations of where you can use Amazon Lambdas. So for example, data processing, you can use AWS Lambda to execute code in the responsive execute code in response to a trigger, such as changes in the data, shifts in the system state, or actions by user. So as I said earlier, the trigger point for the AWS Lambda would be changes in the data or a shift in the system state, basically, or any action by an user, basically any REST endpoint call or anything. Okay, and if you notice, Lambda can be triggered by AWS services using S3, DynamoDB, Kinesis, SNS, and CloudWatch. Okay, which allows you to directly call the serverless data directly from the AWS machines. Okay, so that is what they are providing. Same way, real-time file processing, you can do that as well. You can get the file pushed to S3, and S3 triggers a AWS Lambda function. You can process the data immediately, and then you can do whatever you want with the data. Basically, you can upload the data back again, or do something with it. So you can literally have S3 as a trigger for AWS Lambda processing as well. Okay, so the other one is the real-time stream processing. So Kinesis is a real-time streaming system which Amazon has. So you can push the data there, and then the Lambda functions are triggered, and you can store them in the DynamoDB and then process that data. Okay. So basically you can use it for ETL processes. If you know what is ETL, ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. So most of the places you would have noticed that our process will be waiting for a file, and based on the file arrival we process the data, right? So what do we do is we always wait for the file, and our process is always running most of the time, right? So you don't have to do that, because all these AWS Lambda features are triggered based on an event. Basically, if a file is arrived, automatically a function gets spawned, and then you do the extract, transform, and load. So you don't have to keep on running your process. Instead, you can go to serverless architecture, and then for now Amazon provides AWS Lambda, which does that. But in future, I expect every other company trying to solve this serverless architecture problem, and then they come up with some open source software which people can use and leverage and try out. Okay, so that is it. So that's all about the AWS Lambda. So I'll just summarize what we discussed. So AWS Lambda is a uh, basically an architecture where you provide function as a service. So you don't have any servers running, so you just give some function which is sitting out there. So that will be get triggered based on a event or a state change or a file change or something like that. Okay, or a trigger. So based on that, your AWS Lambda function will be executed. In case we saw what is AWS Lambda, so AWS Lambda uses functions. So you just create functions and keep it in the Lambda infrastructure, and then they are triggered by any event which you have configured. And based on that, a server will be spawned, and your function will be executed on the server, and it then goes to sleep. So you have to just pay only for the time when the server was running and when your function was using that server. That's it. Okay, so that is serverless architecture. Okay, hope you understood. If you like my video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Get regular updates from the channel. So that's it for this particular video. Thank you.